It's been almost 20 years since one of the most infamous crime bosses of all time, Joseph Bonanno, who died a week ago at the age of 97, agreed to sit down with us and for the first and only time in front of a television camera, talked about himself and the other real-life godfathers who inhabited his world.
From his humble origins in Sicily to leading the Bonanno crime family, Joseph Bonanno's saga is one of ambition, ruthlessness, and unexpected ties. In the U.S., he rose swiftly through the ranks, becoming one of the youngest ever mob bosses. Here is the story of Joseph Bonanno and his reign in the U.S. cigarette industry. Mafia boss at 26. Joseph Bonanno is a name that would become synonymous with power and influence in the American Mafia. But before we dive into the war that shaped the history of the Bonanno crime family, let's take a look at Joe Bonanno's upbringing and his journey to leading one of the most powerful mafias in the U.S. On the 18th of January, 1905, in the sun-soaked hills of Sicily, a young Joe Bonanno was born into a world where power, loyalty, and violence reigned supreme. His parents were Salvatore Bonanno and Catherine Bonventre. His early life was deeply intertwined with the intricate web of organized crime that permeated the island. His uncles, Giuseppe Bonanno, and his older brother and advisor, Stefano, headed a clan in Castella Marano del Golfo. Their strongest ally was Stefano Magaddino, leader of the Magaddino clan and the brother of Joseph's maternal grandmother. In the 1900s, the clans were in conflict with Felice Buccellato, the boss of the Buccellato clan. From a tender age, Bonanno witnessed the raw brutality and cunning strategies employed by his family, who were deeply entrenched in the mafia. Following the killings of Stefano and Giuseppe, their younger brother, Salvatore sought revenge by eliminating members of the Buccellato family. And in 1902, Magaddino made his way to New York, establishing himself as a powerful figure within the Castellamarese clan. In the early 1910s, Joseph, along with his parents, embarked on a journey across the vast ocean. They boarded a crowded ship, leaving behind their homeland and everything they knew. The voyage was long and arduous, filled with uncertainty and hope for what lay ahead. Finally, after weeks at sea, the Bonanno family arrived in the land of opportunity, New York City. The sight of the Statue of Liberty standing tall in the harbor must have filled them with a sense of awe and anticipation. Little did they know that this bustling metropolis would become the backdrop for Joe's extraordinary life in his later years. Settling in the vibrant neighborhoods of New York City, the Bonanno family faced the challenges of adapting to a new culture and language. They found themselves in a melting pot of different nationalities, each with their own dreams and aspirations. The Bonanno family settled in Williamsburg, New York for 10 years before returning to Italy. It was in this diverse and dynamic environment that Joseph's journey into the world of organized crime would begin. In 1924, Joseph moved back into the United States as a stowaway on a Cuban fishing boat with Peter Magaddino, who was the son of Stefano Magaddino. As Joseph settled into his new life in the bustling streets of New York City, he found himself drawn to the allure of organized crime. The city was a hotbed of illicit activities, and young Joseph was eager to make his mark in this dangerous underworld. It was during the Prohibition era, a time when the sale and consumption of alcohol were banned, that Joseph's involvement in bootlegging began. He quickly realized the immense profits that could be made from this illegal trade, and he wasted no time in establishing his own network of suppliers and distributors. He ran a distillery situated in the basement of an apartment building alongside Gaspar di Gregorio and Giovanni Romano. Tragically, Giovanni Romano lost his life in the distillery following an accidental explosion. In his late 20s, he quickly gained the attention of Salvatore Maranzano, a powerful mob boss at the time, who recognized Bonanno's potential and took him under his wing. Maranzano became a mentor to the young Bonanno, teaching him the intricacies of the criminal world and grooming him for a leadership role. Under Maranzano's guidance, Bonanno honed his skills in various illegal activities, including gambling and extortion. He proved himself to be a shrewd and cunning operator, always staying one step ahead of law enforcement and rival gangs. At this time, Bonanno had become a force to be reckoned with in the criminal underworld. He was drawn to the allure of power, wealth, and respect that came with being a part of the mafia, and he set his sights on climbing the ranks to become a mafia boss. As the years went by, Joe Bonanno's influence within the Bonanno crime family grew exponentially. He established himself as a trusted and respected figure, known for his strategic thinking and ability to maintain order within the organization. His rise to power was marked by his ability to unite various factions within the family, solidifying his position as a force to be reckoned with. By the 1940s, Bonanno had ascended to the position of boss of the Bonanno crime family, a title he would hold for over 3 decades. Organized crime. Under Bonanno's leadership, the family flourished, expanding its operations and influence across the United States. Bonanno's keen business acumen allowed him to diversify the family's criminal activities with a particular focus on the cigarette industry. Recognizing the immense profitability of the cigarette trade, Bonanno saw an opportunity to capitalize on the demand for tobacco products. He established connections with legitimate cigarette manufacturers, forging partnerships that would allow him to infiltrate the legal market. Through bribery, coercion, and intimidation, Bonanno secured a significant share of the industry, solidifying his control over the lucrative trade. But it was not just the legitimate market that interested Bonanno. He also recognized the potential for profit in the illicit cigarette trade. Bonanno established a network of factories that produced counterfeit cigarettes, virtually indistinguishable from legitimate brands. These counterfeit products flooded the market, undercutting legitimate manufacturers and generating immense wealth for the Bonanno crime family. Bonanno's involvement in the cigarette industry brought him immense power and influence. He became a key player in the world of organized crime, with connections that extended far beyond New York City. His ability to control every aspect of the cigarette trade, from production to distribution, solidified his position as a formidable force within the criminal underworld. To bring their contraband into the country, the Bonanno family employed a variety of ingenious smuggling methods. They concealed their illegal goods within legitimate shipments, making it nearly impossible for authorities to detect. And when that wasn't enough, they utilized unsuspecting truck drivers, who unknowingly transported the illicit cigarettes across state lines. With a steady supply of illegal cigarettes secured, the Bonanno family established a sophisticated distribution network. They had a web of trusted associates who would distribute the contraband to retailers, operating right under the noses of law enforcement. These unsuspecting retailers, unaware of the illicit nature of the cigarettes, unknowingly became pawns in the Bonanno family's grand scheme. But the Bonanno mob's rise to power was not without its fair share of ruthlessness. They employed intimidation tactics, extorting retailers who dared to resist their control. Those who crossed the Bonanno mob faced dire consequences, often resulting in violence or even death. This iron grip on the illegal cigarette trade allowed the Bonanno mob to maintain control and eliminate any potential threats. The Bonanno mob's journey into the illegal cigarette trade was skyrocketing, fueled by ambition, cunning, and a disregard for the law. But as we shall soon discover, their reign would eventually come to a dramatic end. Law enforcement agencies, determined to dismantle their illicit operation, launched a massive investigation. Through meticulous surveillance and intelligence gathering, they gathered enough evidence to bring down the key members of the Bonanno mob. The subsequent trial was a spectacle, with the prosecution presenting a mountain of evidence against the Bonanno mob. The charges against them included at least 199 acts of racketeering, including gambling offenses, narcotics offenses, trafficking in contraband cigarettes, transportation of stolen stock certificates, extortion, usury, labor racketeering, and interference with commerce by threats or violence. Apart from the illegal cigarette trade, Joseph Bonanno was involved with organized crime far beyond the borders of New York City. He also had deep ties to the branches of the Mafia in Montreal, Canada. The Montreal Mafia was one of the branches of the mob that had strong ties to Joe Bonanno. The Quebec Crime Probe report of 1976 brought to light the structure of the Montreal Mafia and its dependency on the Bonanno family. This revelation was based on information gathered through surveillance and wiretaps, which exposed the intricate web of relationships and operations within the Montreal Mafia. The roots of the Montreal Mafia can be traced back to the 1940s when Frank Cotroni, the older brother of Vic Cotroni, established the family as an important branch of the New York City Mafia family of Joe Bonanno. The Cotroni family primarily engaged in illegal gambling, loan sharking, drug trafficking, extortion, and the corruption of public officials. Their influence extended beyond Montreal, with connections to mafia families in Italy and throughout the United States. The Montreal Mafia was involved in a wide range of illegal activities, with drug trafficking being one of its primary sources of revenue. The family controlled a significant portion of the drug trade in Montreal, importing and distributing various narcotics, including cocaine and heroin. Their connections with international drug cartels allowed them to establish a lucrative network that extended beyond Canada's borders. In addition to drug trafficking, the Montreal Mafia was heavily involved in illegal gambling. They operated numerous illegal casinos, bookmaking operations, and gaming houses throughout the city. These establishments served as fronts for money laundering and provided a steady stream of income for the organization. Extortion was another key activity of the Montreal Mafia. They would target businesses, particularly those in the construction industry, demanding protection money in exchange for ensuring their safety and security. Those who refused to comply with their demands often faced violent consequences, including physical harm or property damage. The Montreal Mafia also had a history of engaging in contract killings. They would carry out hits on rival gang members, individuals who posed a a threat to their operations or those who had betrayed the organization. These targeted killings were often executed with precision and ruthlessness, sending a clear message to anyone who dared to challenge the Montreal Mafia's authority. Throughout its dominance, the Montreal Mafia faced internal conflicts and power struggles. The organization was not immune to infighting and rivalries, particularly between Sicilian and Calabrian factions within the family. These conflicts sometimes erupted into violence, resulting in the deaths of key members and destabilizing the organization. In the late 1900s, the family faced a series of setbacks, including the imprisonment and extradition of key leaders, internal conflicts, and increased law enforcement scrutiny. These factors weakened the organization and led to a power vacuum within the Montreal Mafia. The Castella Marano War. The Castella Marano War erupted in the late 1920s, pitting Maranzano, Bonanno's mentor, against Joe the Boss Masseria in a battle for control over various territories and criminal enterprises. Bonanno, then Maranzano's underboss, found himself in the midst of this bloody conflict. The war raged on for years, with both sides vying for dominance. On one side, Maranzano had the support of loyal lieutenants like Tommy Lucchese, Stefano Magadino, and Joseph Magliocco. On the other side, Joe the Boss Masseria had powerful allies in Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese, Joe Adonis, Carlo Gambino, Albert, Anastasia, and Frank Costello. Bonanno played a crucial role in Maranzano's camp, using his intelligence and cunning to navigate the treacherous waters of the underworld. As the war intensified, alliances shifted, and blood was shed on the streets of New York City. During this phase, Joseph Bonanno was essentially an illegal immigrant, having snuck back into the country in 1924. However, later on, he made the decision to leave the U.S. once again and re-enter legally to apply for citizenship. This was granted in 1945, by which time Bonanno had already amassed a fortune. In a clandestine agreement with Maranzano, Luciano orchestrated the murder of his boss, Masseria, on April 15, 1931, in exchange for acquiring Masseria's criminal operations and assuming the role of Maranzano's second-in-command. However, perceiving Maranzano as more proactive and conservative than Masseria, Luciano declared himself capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses, and arranged Maranzano's murder on September 10, 1931. Following Maranzano's death, Bonanno took charge, referring to himself as father, overseeing a significant portion of Maranzano's family. In his autobiography, Bonanno claimed ignorance of Luciano's plans, learning about them later from Magadino. Allegedly, Maranzano and Luciano's dispute over influence in the garment district escalated to the point where Maranzano intended to assassinate Luciano soon after his own death. Bonanno, opting for peace, believed that going to war with Luciano served no purpose, as Luciano sought independence and demanded nothing from them. Despite mob expert Anthony Bruno finding it illogical, Bonanno asserted that Luciano allowed him to live because he chose peace over supporting Maranzano. After years of constant battles, the war finally came to an end. Lucky Luciano and Vito Genovese devised a plan to reorganize the mob, eliminating the old bosses and ushering in a new era of business-like operations. Their vision would forever change the landscape of organized crime. With the establishment of the Commission, a council where family bosses would meet to discuss mob affairs and make decisions, Bonanno found himself holding a seat and casting one vote. Joseph's influence extended beyond his own family. He held the prestigious position of chairman of the Commission, the governing body of the American Mafia, from 1959 to 1962. This role allowed him to exert control and influence over the entire criminal underworld, making him a force to be feared. The media dubbed him Joe Bananas, a nickname that both reflected his Italian heritage and the fear he instilled in his enemies. Joseph Bonanno had become a household name, synonymous with power, wealth, and the dark underbelly of organized crime. He managed various legitimate enterprises, such as 3 coat manufacturing companies, laundries, cheese suppliers between 1964 and 1979, funeral homes, and a trucking company. The Brooklyn funeral parlor owned by Bonanno was suspected of being a front for disposing of bodies. Notably, it was alleged to construct double-decker coffins, facilitating the burial of more than one body simultaneously. Despite his wealth, Joe Bonanno didn't flaunt it. He lived a relatively low-key lifestyle, preferring to keep a low profile. Unlike some of his contemporaries, such as John Gotti, Bonanno didn't indulge in flashy displays of wealth. The only luxury he truly enjoyed was his love for expensive cigars. Bonanno managed to fly under the radar of law enforcement, avoiding arrest and jail time during his early days. While many other mobsters of his time found themselves in and out of prison, Bonanno skillfully evaded the clutches of the law. However, fate had other plans for Joseph Bonanno. In 1957, the infamous Appalachian meeting took place, bringing the mob into the national spotlight. The meeting, organized by Vito Genovese, drew the attention of law enforcement when expensive cars arrived in the quiet town of Appalachian, all heading to the same house. The police raided the meeting, making several high-profile arrests. Joseph Bonanno was one of the lucky ones to avoid capture, but the incident drew the attention of the FBI and put the spotlight on the American Mafia. Following the Appalachian meeting, Joseph Bonanno disappeared into hiding. The other mob bosses grew impatient with his absence, and months passed without any response from him. Eventually, they made the decision to hand over the reign to Gaspar di Gregorio. The split within the Bonanno crime family led to tensions and conflicts, particularly with Gaspar di Gregorio at the helm. In 1966, a meeting between the two factions turned violent, as di Gregorio planned to eliminate the Bonanno contingent. However, the attempt failed and no lives were lost. The Commission, the governing body of the American Mafia, had to intervene to bring an end to the war. Di Gregorio was replaced as the mob boss, and Paul Siaka was promoted to restore order within the family. The Commission and Disappearance. Now, Joe Bonanno was an ambitious and daring man. He had gained the resources and knowledge to expand his territories, and to do this, he had to eliminate his rivals. In 1963, he hatched a daring plan to eliminate several rivals on the Mafia Commission, including Tommy Lucchese, Carlo Gambino, Stefano Magaddino, and Frank De Simone, aiming to solidify his dominance. But fate had other plans. The plot was discovered, and Bonanno found himself in a race against time to escape the retribution that awaited him. During this time, he collaborated with Joseph Magliocco, the Profaci crime family boss. During their exploits to eliminate his rivals, the Commission figured out who the mastermind was. The Commission summoned Bonanno and Magliocco to explain themselves, but with his life hanging in the balance, Bonanno made a daring yet necessary escape to Canada, seeking refuge from the storm that was brewing in New York. For a brief period, he vanished from the public eye, leaving behind a power struggle within the Bonanno family that would come to be known as the Bonanno War. Severely rattled and facing deteriorating health, Magliocco admitted his involvement in the conspiracy. While sparing Magliocco's life, the Commission compelled his retirement as the Profaci family boss, coupled with a $50,000 fine. In October 1964, he returned to Manhattan. However, on October 21, 1964, the day before Bonanno was set to testify to a grand jury, his attorneys reported that after a dinner with them, he was abducted, allegedly taken by Magaddino's men. The incident occurred as he entered an apartment building on Park Avenue and East 36th Street, where one of his lawyers resided. FBI recordings of New Jersey boss Sam the Plumber DiCavalcante indicated that other bosses were caught off guard by Bonanno's disappearance. Additional FBI recordings captured disgruntled Bonanno soldiers expressing, "That son of a took off and left us here alone." During Bonanno's absence, Gaspar di Gregorio exploited family discontent over Joe's son, Bill Bonanno's role, asserting family leadership. Designated by the Mafia Commission as Bonanno family boss, the Di Gregorio revolt triggered 4 years of internal strife, dubbed the Bonanno War by the media. In early 1966, Di Gregorio allegedly proposed a peace meeting to Bill, who agreed, suggesting his granduncle's house on Troutman Street in Brooklyn as the venue. On January 28, 1966, as Bill and his loyalists approached the house, they faced gunfire. Fortunately, no one was injured. Bonanno reappeared on May 17, 1966, at Foley Square, New York. In 1968, Di Gregorio sustained injuries from machine gun fire and later suffered a heart attack. The Commission grew dissatisfied with Di Gregorio's attempts to quell the family rebellion, replacing him with Paul Siaka. In 1968, following a heart attack, Bonanno concluded the family conflict by agreeing to retire as boss and relocate to Arizona. As part of the peace agreement, Bill resigned and left New York with his father. It was during this period of uncertainty that the law finally caught up with Bonanno. In 1983, Joe Bonanno served 8 months in prison for obstruction of justice. In 1985, he faced a 14-month imprisonment for contempt of court, refusing to testify in a federal racketeering case. Due to his advanced age and deteriorating health, he was transferred from the Federal Correctional Institution in Tucson, Arizona, to the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. On the 1st of November 1986, he was released, citing his illness and old age. Life after the Mafia. By 1968, Bonanno had retreated to his Tucson, Arizona home, where he would spend the rest of his days. He lived a relatively quiet public life, but his notoriety as a former mafia chieftain followed him. Despite his attempts to retire peacefully, Bonanno found himself under the watchful eye of federal agents who were keen to uncover any remnants of his criminal activities. But complications and unexpected events were waiting in the wings, ready to further test Bonanno's resolve and challenge his reputation. One such event was a series of bombings that rocked Tucson Tucson, Arizona in the late 1960s, targeting various mafia leaders and individuals connected to them. These bombings, orchestrated by a former FBI agent named David Hale, aimed to foment gang warfare among the mafia factions. The bombings caused property damage but fortunately did not result in any fatalities. The bombings added to the already complex narrative surrounding Bonanno's life. Speculation arose that a gang war had erupted between factions led by Bonanno and Peter Licavoli, the boss of the Detroit Mafia family. Bonanno himself became a target, and the local police chief warned him of potential retaliation if anything happened to witnesses before they testified. After the bombings, one police officer said, "This is obviously a case of retaliation involving mafia warfare between Bonanno family members and those who oppose him in Tucson. The bombings were done for intimidation, as a way of saying they can go further." In the midst of this chaos, Joe Bonanno's son, Salvatore, decided to meet secretly with James Corbett Jr., the mayor of Tucson, to deny responsibility for the bombings. This meeting, later disclosed by the mayor, further highlighted the tensions and conflicts surrounding Bonanno and his family's image. As the 1970s and 1980s continued to unfold, Bonanno faced a series of legal battles and challenges. A bomb in his car killed an Arizona Republic reporter in 1976, leading to a series of stories that focused on crime in Arizona and directed hate towards mafia figures like Bonanno. In 1978, a Penthouse article named Bonanno as the real godfather, falsely claiming that he still controlled his family in New York and was involved in a massive drug trafficking conspiracy. These events created a poisonous atmosphere and directed public animosity towards Bonanno. Despite the lack of evidence to support the claims, despite the relentless scrutiny and challenges, Bonanno remained resilient. He won a lawsuit against two former Tucson cops who had illegally tapped his phone, and he began serving a sentence for obstruction of justice in a bankruptcy case involving his son. However, his sentence was later reduced due to his health. During Bonanno's trial, he gave interviews to an author, Gay Talese, that formed part of the basis of his 1971 true crime book, Honor Thy Father. The book, which detailed the life of Bonanno's son Bill and his various mafia troubles, also provided a glimpse into the history of the mafia. While Bonanno was furious with his son and claimed to have stopped speaking to him for a year, the book further fueled public interest in the notorious crime family. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Bonanno faced a series of aggressive maneuvers from ambitious prosecutors, federal agents, and local law enforcement. They sought to bring him down and leak their version of the truth to a gullible media, painting Bonanno as a powerful figure with control over his family and involvement in a massive drug trafficking conspiracy. However, there was little evidence to support these claims, and Bonanno's power had diminished significantly. Despite the challenges he faced, Joe Bonanno remained a figure of intrigue and mystery. His reputation as a former mafia boss and his alleged criminal activities continued to captivate the public's imagination. The FBI maintained a keen interest in uncovering the true status of Joe Bonanno, adding to the air of mystery that surrounded him. Following his television appearance on CBS, as mentioned earlier, Joseph Bonanno decided to take his storytelling a step further. In 1983, he released a book titled A Man of Honor, an autobiography of his life. In 1984, Bonanno was released from prison, but his life had been forever altered. He had lost much of his power and influence, and his reputation as a former mafia chieftain continued to overshadow his existence. Despite his diminished status, Bonanno remained a figure of interest to law enforcement and the public. While Joseph Bonanno didn't break the code of secrecy by revealing any secrets or answering questions from the government or police, the mere act of publishing a book was seen as a betrayal by the current mob bosses. The mob bosses felt that Bonanno had violated the code of silence, even if he didn't disclose any specific details. The release of the book strained his relationships within the mafia and marked a turning point in his life. In a twist of irony, Joe Massino, who was the Bonanno crime boss in 1983, took it upon himself to rename the family the Massino crime family. However, this name change was never widely used, as Massino would later become a government informant. In the later years of his life, Joseph Bonanno lived a relatively quiet existence. He had an illustrious career that spanned many decades, and he was the last of the Mustache Pete mob bosses. Bonanno died of heart failure at the age of 97 in 2002, leaving behind a legacy that continues to captivate and intrigue to this day. Bonanno's life and involvement in organized crime have also been immortalized in various films and TV shows. From mobsters to The Sopranos, his story continues to captivate audiences, offering a glimpse into the dark and dangerous world of the American Mafia. If you enjoyed this video, click on the boxes playing on your screen to watch similar content.